all very much for being with us today. So Andrea?
And Rita, would you pull up that first slide?
Actually, Andrea, I'm going to be doing
Or
that.
Kathleen? Rita had a look of panic on her face there for a second. Sorry about that. Great. So some of you, this may be background knowledge that you've always known, and elements of it may be new, but I'll go through it and pretend that we are all learning it for the first time. The pursuit of truth, veritas, is integral to the charism of the Dominican order. Saint Dominic embraced study and learning as essential to fulfilling the preaching mission in the order, in the church, and in the world. In the United States, many Dominican sisters congregations established elementary and high schools to carry on the tradition of the order. And for nearly 200 years, Dominican women religious have faithfully sponsored and staffed these schools in service to the church. During this time, the sisters have partnered and collaborated with dedicated laypersons who serve our schools in this important ministry as administrators and teachers, staff, and board members, partners in ministry like you. Through the years, it has been evident that there are fewer sisters in the school and more lay leadership. This has not been lost on the sisters or those of you who have partnered with us. 7 years ago, the school leaders, in association with DAS, Dominican Association of Secondary Schools, sent a strong message to the sponsoring congregations, saying they value the heritage the sisters have given and are committed to the Dominican charism, and urge them to develop a plan for the sponsorship of the schools. The congregations appreciated the commitment to Catholic Dominican education and continuing with their commitment to collaborate in planning for the future of Dominican education. They joined with other Dominican congregations, and through the mutual study, discernment, and prayer, they made the decision to pursue a new joint sponsorship model, which we call Dominican Veritas Ministries, or DVM. All right. The mission and purpose of Dominican Veritas Ministries, DVM, is to ensure the Catholic and Dominican identities of our educational institutions by envisioning a new model of sponsorship to move our educational ministry into the future. Dominican sisters congregations are collaborating in their role of sponsorship by establishing a pontifical public juridic person, PJP, to serve as the future sponsor of their schools. Forming this PJP allows the congregations to share sponsorship responsibilities and strengthen mission integration in the schools. Participating congregations in their schools are reimagining Dominican education in the 21st century by creating a pontifical public juridic person. This person is really a group of sisters from various Dominican congregations who collectively have the capacity to name a school Catholic. This is the same capacity congregations have for their respective sponsored schools. In this session today, you'll learn more about the purpose and the story of Dominican education. We'll also share with you what's been accomplished already as we move forward in this new collaborative model for Dominican education, what is still in process, and the parts of the process we are currently addressing. We will learn much today, but before we move on to look at the background of Dominican education, does anyone have any questions at this point? Feel free to either say it out loud or raise your hand or chat you can type it out in the chat function. And there'll be lots of opportunities to ask questions as well throughout this presentation.
No questions? All right. Thank you, Andrea.
Welcome.
Before I begin, I would just like to have a little disclaimer. I am here bubbling with my family in Florida also, but I have 2 young scholars, my grandniece and nephew, that are also in school today. We're all sharing the same bandwidth. So if I get a little unstable, it's their fault. But I give them first preference to bandwidth because, you know, they were here first. Okay, so the history. The first Dominicans in the Americas arrived in 1510 on the Bahamian island occupied by the Taino people. Called Hispaniola by the Europeans who overtook the island, we know it today as Haiti and the Dominican Republic. It didn't take long for the Dominican friars to get into some good trouble, as Congressman John Lewis would call it. On the first Sunday of Advent in 1511, after the community of friars spent days in study and prayer, they agreed they could not cooperate with the enslavement of the native peoples. They crafted a homily delivered from the pulpit by Friar Antonio Montesinos, who cried out, "By what right of justice do you hold these Indians in such a cruel and horrible servitude? On what authority have you waged such detestable wars against these people? Why do you keep them so oppressed? They die, or rather, you kill them, in order to extract and acquire gold." In this way, the first Dominican teaching of truth and justice was heard in the Americas 519 years ago. It was 275 years later before Dominicans began a ministry on the continental US, and still at service of the government of Spain. The Irish friar, John O'Connell, served as chaplain for the Spanish delegates in New York. 20 years after that, the friars started an educational ministry in earnest. Friar Edward Dominic Fenwick was hoping to open the school in Boston, but was sent instead by Archbishop John Carroll to open a mission west of the Alleghenies in what would soon become the Diocese of Bardstown, Kentucky. There, in 1806, the first Dominican educational institution in the US was established. Recognizing the need for education for youth in this pioneer territory, the Dominican pastor of St. Rose Parish near Springfield, Kentucky, announced from the altar that he needed women to join the order, not as cloistered nuns, but women in simple vows living an active life to provide that education. The first US-born congregation of Dominican women was established when 4 women professed their vows in early 1823. That year, they opened St. Magdalene Academy, which was later renamed St. Catherine of Siena Academy. These early Dominican pioneers created the future of Dominican educational ministry. Each of you, each of us, stand on their shoulders. We are here today because of their vision and their passion. And we are here to sustain their legacy and assure the future of Dominican education for generations to come. This is a very brief history of how we got here, but are there any questions so far before we move on? And you can put that in the chat also if you wish. Okay, Rita?
Okay, no questions. So Dominican Veritas Ministries is being called to life for this purpose, to ensure the Dominican identity of our schools, to create future generations of truth seekers, and to integrate the truth-seeking, gospel-preaching charism of the order more deeply in our schools. Right now, there are 3 congregations of sisters who sponsor 9 schools who are actively engaged in the process of forming the public juridic person. those congregations and schools that will initially be sponsored by Dominican Veritas Ministries are the Adrian Dominican Sisters, who sponsor Rosarian Academy in West Palm Beach, Florida, a pre-K through 8 school, and Regina Dominican High School in Wilmette, Illinois. So we've had an opportunity to meet the representatives from there. In addition, the Dominican Sisters of Houston, who sponsor St. Agnes Academy in Houston, Texas, as well as St. Pius X High School in Houston, Texas. And the Dominican Sisters of Sinsinawa, who sponsor Bethlehem Academy in Faribault, Minnesota, Edgewood Campus School in Madison, Wisconsin, Edgewood High School in Madison, Wisconsin, Dominican High School in Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin, and Trinity High School in River Forest, Illinois. An additional 4 Dominican congregations are interested in joining the PJP at a later date. And those congregations are the Dominican Sisters of Mission San Jose, which is in California, with 2 schools, the Dominican Sisters of Peace with 4 schools, and the Dominican Sisters of Sparkill with 1 school, and the Dominican Sisters of Springfield with 3 schools. So it's important to remember that we all are part of a broader family of Dominican schools. These congregations and schools will become affiliates of Dominican Veritas Ministries. They will retain their current sponsoring organization, and they'll participate with the Dominican Veritas Ministries schools in programs for promoting and integrating the Dominican charism within the school. The schools entering into Dominican Veritas Ministries, those of you who are gathered here today, will join in those opportunities for furthering the charism and also receive additional services for board and faculty formation programs. The transition to forming Dominican Veritas Ministries is led by a task force, including project managers. So Sister Kathleen Tate, who is our Zoom master today and moving our slides along, as well as myself. And we also have legal and canonical advisors. So our canonical advisor is Sister Peggy Martin, and our legal counsel is Mr. Larry Singer. The task force also includes representatives from 7 congregations who are part of this process. And in addition, 2 other congregations have offered their expertise to this effort without direct participation in the process. So we're going to pause there for a moment. And again, are there any questions, clarification, anything like that that you'd like to ask?
Rita?
Yes, Erica.
Will eventually become full members? Is that the idea? Are they in process toward that, or will that remain a separate thing?
Erica, you froze for a moment there. I think I understood the question to be, will the others become full members at a later point? Is that?
Right. Or is there an intention to have affiliate members continuing with this?
I think it will be a both and. There are 2 congregations who will be, as they are able to, joining Dominican Veritas Ministry, or the schools will be, and others. The intention is to join, and please, Kathleen and Colleen, feel free to jump in. But my understanding is that that is the intention. And there may as well continue to be affiliate schools as needed.
I would agree with that, Rita. I think there are some other Dominican schools that haven't been directly involved in this effort that very well may become affiliate schools so they can join in the whole Dominican education project, so to say. But others are really working towards becoming members.
Any other questions or clarification at this point? Okay. So I'll turn it over to Kathleen.
Thanks, Rita. You may have had time to review the video that was sent out to you in the invitation for this session. And if you haven't already, it would be good to do so to get a fuller understanding of Dominican Veritas Ministries. Today, however, I'll give you a brief overview to explain the governance structure. A pontifical public juridic person, in addition to being a mouthful, is a structure offered by the church to sponsor its ministries. The PJP is given the authority by the church to recognize a sponsored school as Catholic. Now, this is currently the role of your sponsoring congregations. Your schools can be called Catholic because the Dominican Sisters of Adrian, the Dominican Sisters of Houston, the Dominican Sisters of Cincinnati say and attest to the fact that you are a Catholic school. We created this canonical or church structure to provide a collaborative way to sponsor and govern our Dominican schools, to offer programs and services that strengthen the Dominican character and help integrate the Dominican mission of preaching the gospel of truth within our schools. So what has happened so far? Well, the Dominican Veritas Task Force has been meeting monthly for the last 2 years. And we have facilitated approval of the statutes and bylaws for the Dominican Veritas Ministries by the congregations involved in the effort. We've also enlisted the services of a canon and civil lawyer. You saw Peggy and the pictures at the beginning here. And the congregations have met with the bishops in whose dioceses the schools are located. We've also developed financial and communication plans to facilitate the opening of the DVM office. This meeting and those that we'll have in the future are an important part of that process. And just because we thought you might be curious, this is a list of the dioceses where the DVM and affiliate schools are located. So if you want to visit everybody, you can do a lot of traveling once this COVID is lifted. Again, the video we provided gives a more complete explanation of the structure of the Dominican Veritas Ministries, but this is actually the design of it, okay? In the bottom left-hand corner, that represents the whole structure that will govern Dominican Veritas Ministries. The pontifical public juridic person is represented in the orange oval, and they hold the reserved powers for the schools within the PJP. This is the member board, similar to the member board that your sponsoring congregations now have. This is Dominican Veritas Ministries. The Dominican schools within Dominican Veritas Ministries will have a common canonical sponsor, which is DVM. However, you will remain separate civil corporations with your own local school boards. This will not replace the work of the local school boards. You're integral to the success and the future of your schools. You will still retain the greater portion of your responsibilities. Now, your school bylaws will need some revisions because school bylaws vary somewhat from each other. So there may be a few instances of things that you cleared through your congregational member board, while schools with different congregational sponsors did not. So we need to work through those differences eventually. The Dominican Veritas Ministries member board will operate through a nonprofit corporation, Dominican Veritas Ministries Incorporated. This blue rectangle represents where the DVM nonprofit corporation is housed. So it will include the member board, that is Dominican Veritas Ministry, which holds the reserved powers connected to mission integration. It also includes a board of trustees, which is responsible for oversight and governance of the DVM sponsorship office and the schools sponsored by DVM. The trustee board will provide both legal and financial oversight, as well as programming for the Catholicity and Charism within the schools. It's important for you to know that legal and financial oversight relates more to monitoring the actions of the local boards, not usurping those actions. When you think about it, there are legal incidences and financial decisions that you currently take to your member board, either with further information or clarifying information, or sometimes you need approval. This is comparable to those situations. So these trustees are appointed by the member board. They're responsible for reporting the state of affairs to the member board, and they're responsible for performing some of the duties assigned them by the member board. And then also in this non-for-profit corporation is located the DVM sponsorship office, which will actually provide the direct contact with the schools and provide services centered around mission integration. This office will also serve the member and trustee board. And the most important part of this structure is the individual schools. You will have your own board of directors, and they'll be officially appointed by DVM, but you'll manage basically what you do now, on-site management of the schools in conjunction with school leaders. The influence of Dominican Veritas Ministries relates primarily with the Catholicity and the Dominican Charism within the schools. You will remain your own corporation, and your investments and finances remain with the individual schools. And DVM does not take away the state or national accreditation requirements for the schools. So you still get to abide by those mandates and do all that paperwork. Before I go any further, because the structure is probably where a lot of the questions are, I'm going to pause there for questions on this structure.
You know, would the trustee board need to approve new board members as well?
You know, with the board members of the schools, whatever process you go through for selecting board members for your schools will remain the same. What will happen then is you'll send them to the trustee board and they'll approve it. You know, it's more a function. And there'll be a representative from DVM on your school board, so that communication will help too. I would think it would be a rare situation where they would say, no, you can't ask that board member. I mean, much in the same way congregational leaders do now.
So I have a question on that.
Yes.
To avoid potentially awkward situations, if DVM would not approve candidates, I suppose the school board of directors should almost submit for advance approval of candidates you're contemplating. Is that what you would advise?
You know, I think that could be part of the process. Yeah, and you're right. It probably would be better than to point somebody and then have them say no. And again, because there'll be somebody from the DVM office working with you on those boards, I think that will be easily facilitated.
can you share a little bit more? You mentioned something about activities or something in regards to mission integration.
Right.
Can you expand a little bit on what that is? And is that something that somewhat replaces a director of mission integration in the school?
No, it wouldn't replace that position at all. But they would provide services that maybe your sponsoring congregations do now, or some of the activities of Dominican Association of Secondary Schools. So they'll just, and board formations for you. You know, so especially because all of you will be in DVM, there'll be support for those kinds of orientations.
Thank you.
Kathleen, what do you see as the role of DOS as we go forward?
You know what? I'm going to talk about that in a little while. So can we just hold on to that
Sure.
and we'll go from there?
Okay.
Okay, I'll go ahead and move on if there's not any other questions right now. So what is Dominican Veritas Task Force working on now? We are finalizing the financial plans for the whole operation. We're also developing responsibilities of the DVM sponsorship office and gathering input from schools about DVM services that they want. Again, this meeting is the first step in that process, and it'll be a continual interactive process with you. So this is where your involvement is going to be critical to the future of DVM. We will be collaborating with schools on needed bylaw changes. That'll be part of the future meetings with the boards. You may have already heard some of those changes from your congregational leaders, so we'll assist them and you in that process. And then we will be creating the non-for-profit or corporation for DVM and finalizing and submitting the documentation to the Vatican. We hope the official request for the establishment of the DVM will be submitted to the Vatican for approval in the spring of 2021, so this spring. We don't anticipate approval until the end of 2022 or 23. Rome just doesn't move in a day. So for the full establishment and beginning operations, we're still a year or so down the line. Future steps include establishing the sponsorship office, and our goal is to open the office in the fall of 2022. That will give us and all of you time for that transition, both before the office opens and afterwards. We'll need to hire personnel for the office, and we'll be selecting members for the Civil Trustee Board. So at this point, I'm going to pause again. Any other questions for me? Okay, as we've talked, and this gets to what you were asking, Michelle, many of the services provided by the DVM office are services that have been faithfully provided by the Dominican Association of Secondary Schools in the past. And we anticipate that when the DVM office becomes functional, and we're aiming for the fall of 2022, that DOS will be enfolded into the DVM committees formed with administrators and other staff for planning school programs. So we've been in communication. I mean, we recognize that first of all, schools can't be dedicated to two different, entities that are both Dominican and both providing charism. And so we've been working with them, and the game plan that will unfold into DVM.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay, Colleen, I'll turn this back over to you.
I had one quick question. Is
Yes.
there any intention for this group to evolve beyond just the, beyond the charism. For example, being able to operate as a consortium and, perhaps be able to leverage greater, pricing or buying power for certain services and things that are common amongst high schools, or is that completely out of the scope of?
I don't think anything is out of the scope of our future. I really don't. This is a big step right now, and I think we'll start small and we'll build. But yes, I think as we move forward with the schools and trying to serve the schools and help them to be as strong as they can, something like that would be totally possible. But I do think it would be down the line.
And we would really have to be, that would be in the jurisdiction of the members as it is now, to give the mission, what the mission of the organization is. Right now, the mission of Dominican Veritas Ministries is to continue the Dominican charism within educational ministry. And so it would really have to morph that piece as well. What we are looking at is what will be happening with our higher education. We are not including that, or our other ministries within the Dominican congregations that are not necessarily school-based, such as reading programs or daycares or whatever. So this is the beginning of something, but we wanted it to be successful as we move forward in the Dominican charism.
Great, thank you.
Could I just add one other thing as well? I think if we're at all familiar with other kind of groups that are sponsored by a particular religious order or congregations, that identify with a particular charism, we may also be aware of how they highlight the common mission and identity, and how that is then translated into marketing, and how that's translated into other aspects of what of the schools. And I think that there is some possibility and potential there to be looking at that as we've we have different sponsoring congregations, and we have this common identity of being Dominican. And so there's great possibility and potential for really looking at that, highlighting that, and creating that stronger identity based in our mission, charism, and purpose, and to use that, to leverage that in a way.
Okay, any other questions? Well, as partners in this venture, yourself as school leaders and board members who share in the Dominican mission, we do want your input into this process as we move forward. This introductory session has given you a lot of information and hopefully much to ponder. We will have follow-up sessions with you this April and throughout the year. We've also recorded this session and we'll send it to you afterwards. And we'd ask you to share the session and what you're hearing with your board of directors and your executive teams in your schools. You will want to take some time to think about your communication plan for this. We really thought about how we were going to be communicating this with all of you. It started with the leadership of all of our schools, of our congregations, knowing that we needed to look for a new form of sponsorship. And now we are saying we now need to bring our leadership of our schools into this process. So you need to think of how much information and when and where to give this important information. So that's up for you to decide. So what are the next steps? Well, after this presentation, you will receive a survey immediately following. It will not be to grade the amenities of this meeting, but we want your input as to what you're thinking. We ask that you complete the survey that will help us plan for the future. There will be different surveys for your different functions. So school leaders will get one survey and board members will get a different survey. The school staff will be focusing mainly on services of the Dominican Volunteer Ministry Office and future school meetings. The board members, however, will be asked on the services that they may need for this transition in terms of governance and questions that they may have about their responsibilities and how the boards will be interacting with DVM into the future. So you're going to be asked to fill out the survey. The school leaders and the board members both have different focuses for your questions or answers. And then we have a second set of meetings set up after Easter. For administrative personnel from DVM will be joining the affiliated schools to meet later in April. We did not include affiliate schools with this. We wanted to have this meeting with those who are moving forward. Then later in April, we'll have board members and heads of schools will also meet. If the whole board can't participate in that next meeting, we ask that those who are responsible for bylaws to join. It would be very helpful because in that session, we will be talking about what changes might be necessary for the local bylaws. And we'll begin to outline the considerations for changes in those bylaws and also look at what you have put in the survey. So I'm going to stop. Are there any other questions before we bring this to an end? You know that you can always contact any of us who have been speaking today. And we know that you have partnered for many years with your congregational leaders in your school. And this is a change. This is a change that those congregational leaders are very excited about, not because we're changing sponsorship, but because we are ensuring the future of Dominican ministry. And that's what's important to those of us in leadership. And we hope that you will join us in this mission. And you are integral in this planning process for the future. So we thank you again for attending this afternoon. And we're going to hang out on Zoom for a while. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask right now to any of us, we'll be staying on Zoom. And for the rest of you, we thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleen, I have a question.
Yeah.
There are schools that we are working with to update their bylaws. And it will be interesting to see what changes will be coming. I guess my question is, should we continue this endeavor of updating? Or should we put everything on hold?
Michelle, most of the, sorry, go ahead, Colleen.
You know, you're the bylaw queen right now.
Well, no, I was going to say what we are doing is actually a good transition to
really is.
DVM because it's really reflective of this new structure. So it will be, especially based on, the fact that some of our schools have not updated their bylaws in the past, 10, 12 years. So we want to make sure that that's done and it will make this transition go very, very smoothly.
Okay. So,
And And one of the things that you're working on right now, or that our schools are transitioning it to be aligned with our current practice of the Sponsors Council, which
Right.
will then align very well with DVM ministries.
Thanks.
So,
Yeah,
yes,
it's very similar.
continue.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So we still have our job.
Yeah, definitely. Any
have a-
other questions that you might have?
So I have a question.
Yes,
So it's a
John.
great presentation, but I easily miss things. So forgive me if this was really covered.
And you're
But
getting it recorded.
let's say 5 years down the road, so ECA, Edgewood Campus Schools with Cincinnati Dominicans,
Mhm.
5 years down the road, will there still be, an identity of Cincinnati Dominicans within this? Really, is this going to be an NCAA with a bunch of conferences still existing, or will there just be an NCAA?
You know, speaking as a Dominican sister who has worked in some of our sponsored schools and that kind of thing, I can't imagine that Edgewood isn't still going to have an affinity for the Dominican Sisters of Cincinnati and vice versa. You know, officially, will you be sponsored by them? No. But, you know, they've got blood in your schools. They're not going to let you go.
Right.
Yeah, we'll never forget our
we
histories,
remain
our
the-
foundations. Yeah.
Right. Right. And we
Great.
remain the founding sisters of the
Right.
of the school.
Of course.
So
Sure.
these three congregations are going to be considered the founding congregations, but we will be the founding congregation of Edgewood Campus School
Okay.
forever because we are.
Yes, that's
But
very
that's a
helpful.
great question.
Great. Mhm.
John, are you just concerned about getting mound bread? Is that the?
Well, there is that factor. That's a good point. Again, there was the question about unifying. Maybe mound bread can be shipped around the country now, even more
There
broadly.
you go.
If it's in the budget of the office, that would be great.
Right.
Everybody
Yeah.
else would love it.
Yeah.
Great.
Any other questions?
Was this helpful today?
Good.
Yeah, and going forward, we think it's Erica, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're
She's
going to go.
leaving.
You're
I think
leaving.
she's
All right.
leaving.
Bye, Erica.
But going forward, you know, I think meeting with other board members and meeting with other staff of the other schools, you know, you'll feed off of each other too in a very positive way, you know, so.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know,
And-
one of the things I want to point out too, John, I'm sorry that Anne is, I didn't say this in the context, but especially for the Edgewood Campus School and, for example, Rosarian Academy in Florida,
Right.
these are pre-K through 8
Right.
schools. And
Right.
so
That is. Yep. Mhm.
there's a great opportunity there to connect in a way that has not been possible, right? Like
That's an
it's-
excellent point, because
Yeah.
the Cincinnatians have high schools and colleges, and we have been different. So
Right.
that
Yeah.
is an
Right.
interesting point. Yep.
Unique,
And-
not different, unique.
Yeah. And there are other, you know, pre-K through 12 schools, but because of their structure, you know, they have a different,
Right.
you know, they have a principal, et cetera. And so to be able to with the PJP schools and affiliate schools, to have that opportunity to connect, share ideas, resources, et cetera, I think there's going to be a great source of support in there that has not been available before, or we don't have, like, because DOS is secondary schools, because Cincinnati, like you said, we're high schools and higher ed and having you know, just one.
Yeah, that's a great point. Mhm.
Yeah.
And historically, our schools, I don't know about other congregations, but our schools have been very connected directly to the leadership, but not to each other. You know, so we have
Right.
missed incredible opportunities of best practices and synergy that we are now just taking hold of because of the Sponsors Council that we have. And thank you, 3 members of our Sponsors Council right here. And this will be another layer of, this will be another great synergy that we'll have for best practices around the, you know, more around the country. Any other questions or comments? Comments?
Just wondering, Donna and Mary Margaret as the
Yeah. Is there
Part of
something we're
our-
missing?
our steering committee and task force.
All right, Kathleen just asked me and I said I have to get off for another Zoom.
That's
Okay.
fine.
Bye.
I'll see her tomorrow on a Zoom, so I'll try to fill her in. No, I think you did a great job. I just, I was like, oh, let me talk this real fast. So,
Okay,
okay, so I'll.
take care. We'll see you tomorrow, Donna.
Okay,
All
thanks.
right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
No, I thought it was good. And I think to follow up with our own schools, and working with them, because if there are further questions, I think it's
Mhm.
important
Right.
that we do that. But it's a beginning, they got to know one another. They,
Mhm.
you said again, set the context of going forward, and, and already a little bit of dialogue has begun.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay, okay.
So that's good.
I've got to go. Thank you very
All
much.
right.
You're welcome.
Very helpful.
John.
Thank you all.
Thank
you all.
you.
I'm leaving as well.